Action. Today I'm joined by two very special guests, Rishi Patel and Shiv, two longtime friends from back home. We're going to talk some
Yeet.
NFL. We're going to talk some NFL tiers, storylines, and things we're watching for not only this week and Week 8 of the NFL calendar, but also going forward up to February in the Super Bowl.
Fire
I want to start
McCarthy.
off with some NFL tiers. Now the first tier we want to talk about are the elite contenders, teams that we would not be surprised if and when they make the Super Bowl, and teams that up to this point, and we think the rest of the season are going to be able to carry that momentum with that talent, with that coaching, and that quarterback play. So my elite teams are the Chiefs as my only team in the AFC, and then the NFC side, the Packers, the Seahawks, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So what do you guys think about that, and who would you put in your elite category? Those are my four teams. I don't know how many you guys have, but that's for me right now. Those are the only four teams I can say without a shadow of the doubt that I think they will go to the Super Bowl, or at least have a very good chance.
I will absolutely concur with you on the Chiefs pick. But outside of that, even the Ravens, I don't necessarily feel confident, right? Like the regular season last year, cruised through it, and it seems like they could put up a similar performance this season, at least in the regular season. But I see them as the same amount of vulnerability that they had going into the playoffs last season. They have the same amount of vulnerability this season. And it might even be more. I don't feel any more confident that they can, make it out of those first or second. Where'd they get knocked out last year? The second round?
First round against the Titans.
Oh, first round.
But
yeah,
they had a bye. They had a bye, so it was technically the second round, but it was their first playoff game. So regardless, they didn't win a playoff game. Lamar Jackson, he's now it's his third season. His first 2 years, he makes the playoffs. He hasn't won a playoff game in either game. I think the year one, he lost to the Chargers in the playoffs. So that's a good point there with the Ravens. Do you have any other?
I put him in there.
AFC?
I put him in there with an asterisk.
So, but you would have them in yours because they're not in mine. I only have the Chiefs from the AFC in mine.
They have a lot to prove.
But yours, you're saying yours is kind of in between.
Actually,
the elite
yeah, you know what?
Category?
Yeah, that's I'm giving him too much credit there. I wouldn't put him in the elite from the AFC.
So you only have the Chiefs in the AFC as well, then, or do you have any strong feelings about anyone else?
Yeah, with
Maybe
all the
Pittsburgh?
tiers that we got, I don't think Pittsburgh needs to be in the elite category.
Okay, so from the AFC, you guys both have the Chiefs only. Is that what do you have, Shiv, in the AFC?
So I have right now mine are accurate with yours on the NFC. I have Green Bay, Seattle, and Tampa Bay. AFC obviously the Chiefs, but I think
teams, really?
the Steelers.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, all elite teams. The Steelers and the Ravens are knocking on the door. They have a lot to prove in the next couple.
I mean,
weeks
they play each other this week too. I think whoever wins that game is going to easily be able to make that case to be in that elite category. But I know Rishi was a little confused there while we had the Packers, the Seahawks, and the Buccaneers. So, Rishi, I want you to talk about that a little bit because even when I'm looking down my list, I can see those holes. The Packers got blown out by the Buccaneers. Seattle lost to the Cardinals just last week, and they almost lost to the Vikings and Patriots, who we kind of all are realizing aren't that good. And then Tampa Bay has some ugly losses, including Chicago on primetime. So I know you had some concerns with those NFC teams. Who would yours be, and what do you see wrong with ours, maybe?
I just think I think it's my problem is a little bit more with even having an elite category this season. It feels like perhaps that's not even really a viable option just because, one, there's injuries, two, there's COVID uncertainty, and three, it's been shown that even the teams that we put in the elite category, with the exception of the Steelers, they can all be beat, and they have been beat by someone. And most of those teams haven't been other elite teams. I know the Chiefs. I know the Chiefs took a fat L from the Vegas Raiders, and I was all about that. But yeah, so I don't know. I think no one's really elite if we're being honest.
Okay, so that's interesting. So to you don't really have an elite apex predator team right now. You have teams that are good, but you're not comfortable at this point in the season to say, hey, this team's elite.
Under my definition of elite, which is a pretty strict interpretation here, I would say the only team that even shows that potential of being elite is the Chiefs. Those other teams are at the top of the next category, right? The Packers, Seahawks, and Bucks, but they could easily get to elite.
Right.
Just don't know. Chiefs are getting the benefit of the doubt too, right? Coming off the Super Bowl.
Exactly. So I'm with you there. So I think.
So I
think just to recap our elite tier, for me it was the Chiefs, Packers, Seahawks, and Buccaneers. Shiv's was very, very similar. And then Rishi, while he gives some credence to maybe the Chiefs and he flirted with the idea of the Ravens in there, he's really not comfortable with any team. But if he had to, he would maybe say the Chiefs, which I think is fair based on how this season's going. There's so much parity in the NFL, and I think that's what we all like watching. We don't really know what to expect week to week, season to season. That makes sense. All right, our next tier are the good but teams. So teams that have had success so far. Maybe we don't believe too much in their record. Maybe we think there's a hole here or there, quarterback play, coaching somewhere that we just don't really believe in them that much. For me, these teams are surprisingly the undefeated Steelers, the Tennessee Titans, the Baltimore Ravens, like we just mentioned, the Buffalo Bills, and then two NFC West teams, the Rams and the Cardinals. So this is, I got, 6 teams here in my good but category. What do y'all think about these teams, and who would you put in this tier? Rishi, this is really your first tier because you don't really have an elite category, so you might have a lot more teams in here.
I mean, I'm really going to take everything that you've got, and I'm going to add those 3 NFC teams that you had in your elite category. That's probably my best bet. One contentious point though is biased towards the Cardinals because I have some ties to them, but the Rams, I really do not feel overly confident about. I think they've had some primetime games where they've looked good, and that may be influencing their the perception of their talent. But I don't know. Do I see Jared Goff showing up in a big time game and that offense being able to rely on that absolute cluster muck of running backs? I don't know. I think it's kind of it's a Ford F-150 with F-350 taped over the 150 kind of thing.
Shiv, I'm gonna let you respond to that, but I do want to say, so the Rams are 5-2. They have a pretty good point differential this season, but 4 of those 5 wins were against the NFC East. They played the entire NFC East division already, and then we got the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Redskins, or the Washington Football Team, and the Giants. All 4 teams that everyone knows is in the bottom, 8 or so teams in the NFL. So you can't really give them too much credibility there. And then their other win was against a Chicago team that none of us were really comfortable with being that good. So.
However, I will say, in their defense, they've done one thing really well this season, which has been hard for a lot of other teams, and that is they've stayed healthy for the most part.
Yep, this is true.
So that could play a factor.
And you can only play the teams on your schedule, so you don't want to knock them too much for those 4 wins of the NFC East. But like I said, Shiv, what do you think about Rishi's point here about the Rams? And I know he says he's kind of biased for the Cardinals, but maybe you're a little bit more objective. Do you think they belong in this category, or is it a little bit too early for a young team like that?
So for your point about the Rams, they do have a little bit suspect kind of offense and defense, in my opinion. But you're right that you can only play the teams on your schedule. And to their credit, they've blown out the Eagles. They blew out the Redskins, or the football team. I think they beat the Giants close and the Cowboys close. So they've done pretty well against the NFC East. I like to call them the NFC East division leader right now. So they've got a real test coming up, I think, against the Dolphins. We'll learn a lot about this team. They're coming off a short week. They've got to go to Miami where weird things happen. Early start game, and you're playing against a Dolphins team that's a little sneaky good, in my opinion.
Here's
the next couple weeks. I believe they also play the
Here's an interesting bounce off question of what you just said, right? That Dolphins matchup is important, which I agree. But I'm curious, who do you think has more to kind of prove and defend in terms of the Rams? Is it the offensive side of the ball, or is it the defensive? Because in my opinion, you got a rookie starting quarterback that's playing his first game, and you've just come. The Rams are off a bye, Dolphins are off a bye, right?
Dolphins are off a bye.
Dolphins are off a bye. Well, either way, I think there's no way you can let this kid with the team that he's on go off against your defense if you are the Rams. Right? You got Aaron Donald, you got a couple other guys on the line. I think they have a lot more to prove than. Well, maybe not a lot more, but the offense can't lay an egg. But
I tend to agree with you because the offense for the Rams is led by Goff, and he's got stuff to prove when we get later in the season. Right now, the defense, Jalen Ramsey is not looking like a shutdown corner. His stats may be good now, but in that Chicago game,
like
he got beat like 2 or 3 times. Yeah, he'd be talking like that, but he got beat in Chicago. If they just had the protection to give Nick Foles a little bit more time, it would have been a good, like a 80-yard touchdown bomb. There were 2 plays in particular that, Ramsey hasn't played as well as he has in the past. So I think the defense has a little bit more to prove in this Miami game. But, I mean, like you said, the Rams, for me, I also have them in. they're kind of like smack dab in the middle of that. They're not towards the upper echelon, that tier 2 or the Ravens, Steelers type. They're more in that range. I really do think some of their stats have been skewed by playing the NFC East.
Yeah, and I want to move on from the Rams real quick.
But one team I also have in my tier 2.
No, go ahead, Shiv.
Okay. Yeah, so you guys mentioned your tier 2 teams being like the Steelers, Ravens, Titans, Rams, Bills. One other team I put in there is the Niners. I think they've been banged up by injuries, but you cannot keep Kyle Shanahan and that offense out of this equation. Defense is playing really well. They've got a replacement corner for Richard Sherman in Jason Verrett.
Yes, sir.
As long as he can stay healthy,
sir.
he can be a number 1 corner. And they dismantled the Patriots. I mean, absolutely obliterated them. And Jimmy G was not good. That's really holding this team back besides injuries. I just think that coaching is too good for them to be left out of the tier 2.
So my response to that would be, number one, their injuries. I think it was kind of a bigger deal in the beginning of the season, but you really saw the impact that it had, even losing a game like they did against the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, they shouldn't be losing. And I think if it was any other season in any other division, I would strongly believe they would be in this tier, in this category. But because in front of them, they have 3 teams in their own division. They're last in their division. They have the Seahawks in front of them, the Rams, and the Cardinals. Because of that, that's mainly it's like external reasons why I'm pushing the 49ers back. It's not because of their team or their coaching, which I think are both exceptional. It's more so because of the situation they're in, which is kind of making me want to put them down. So we talked a lot about the NFC West. And I want to talk a little bit more about the AFC and the contenders that we have in there in this tier for me. And that's the Steelers, the Titans, and the Ravens. We touched on the Ravens a little bit already, but the Steelers and Titans are 2 teams. They just played it like last week, and Tennessee kind of made a comeback. They couldn't finish it out. The Steelers are undefeated to the surprise of everyone. The Titans are just as good as last year, if not better. Again, to a surprise to a lot of people. I think last year some of us thought it was going to be a fluke. So what do you guys see there as the teams kind of right below the Chiefs there? Steelers, Titans, Ravens, Bills. I think those are all teams in the mix there. Maybe the Bills will have a little bit of a gap between those other teams. But where do you see these teams shaking out the rest of the season? And do you believe these teams are actually true contenders?
I don't know. It's I feel interestingly. I mean, the Steelers are one thing, but I feel very interestingly about the Bills and the Titans. I just don't really know what to make of it, right? Obviously, Ryan Tannehill is white hot. I mean, he's on fire. He's been throwing for multiple touchdowns nearly every game. Derrick Henry looks like an alien. But I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like their defense was, maybe it wasn't like, the best in the playoffs or anything near that, but it was pretty stellar, pretty stout, like reliable at least, right? Last year. Is that correct? And I feel like this year they're
been bad. No, they're a bottom 5 team in terms of yards. So you're absolutely right. Year to year, we're like talking about narratives like, entering this season, we're like, Houston has a good offense. They don't have a good offense this year, really. Like, they're struggling without Hopkins and stuff like that. The Titans have a really good defense. They're led by their defense last year. So this year we're expecting it. We kind of believe it, but it's just not true.
The same thing applies to the Bills. That's what I guess I'm kind of getting after, is that like these things that they've built this new reputation, this recent reputation on, seem to be kind of faltering a little bit, but they're still hanging around, right? So it's just interesting. I really don't know. I think the Tennessee Titans and the Buffalo Bills are very similar teams, and I only think one of them is going to win the game that they're both playing right now. Just don't know which one.
No, that's a really good point. Shiv, what do you think about that?
So I slightly disagree with you. I think the Titans defense is utter garbage right now. Part of that is because they lost guys like veteran present Logan Ryan. He's on the Giants. I think Adoree Jackson has been out with injuries, so he's taken a hit. As well as if you look on that offensive line, Taylor Lewan, I believe, is the season now. Yeah. The one thing I will say, I do have the Titans in high regard because of 2 things. One, Ryan Tannehill is playing really well. He and that combination of A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, and we know this year is all about offense. The second thing is their coach. Mike Vrabel is one of the top 7 head coaches in the league right now. He looks like first Bill Belichick guys, maybe Brian Flores down in Miami. Young head coach, a quarterback that's playing lights out, and a couple good weapons.
And Mike Vrabel,
we saw this. think if they get a little bit more healthy.
Go ahead, Rishi.
Before Rudy, before you go on your point, I just want to make one comment, and I know this was true last year, that the Titans had one of the best, if not the best, red zone offenses in the league, and that's really why you saw Tannehill have a similar performance to the end of last season, where he had multi-TD games, and I think for them to be able to carry that over into this season, I would assume that they're in similar territory because Tannehill again is going for multiple TDs every game. And I think that is another indication of good coaching, and it's also just it's a good point to make a case for the Tennessee Titans on if they can execute in that space.
And you mentioned the red zone efficiency last season. Part of that actually was because I think from week 8 or week 9 last season throughout the playoffs, the Titans didn't make a single field goal. Like they really didn't have a healthy field goal kicker. So they would always go for it. When it was a goal-to-go situation, they always had 4 downs to work with. So they were scoring a lot more touchdowns. And we kind of saw this play into this year where they're like, okay, we need a kicker. They get Gostkowski. Gostkowski missed 4 kicks on that opening Monday night game against Denver.
Yeah, Gostkowski looks like he doesn't even know who he is.
Mike Vrabel's going to go back to the whole be super aggressive, go for on 4th down, rely on Derrick Henry. You know he's going to get you those yards. Go ahead, Rishi.
But here's the thing that I'm thinking, and Shiv, I'll bring you in on this because we watched a lot of Titans games last year. And, I feel like Vrabel might have felt a little more empowered to do that last year, just having that kind of safety blanket of knowing that, okay, even if we don't get it, our defense has got at least a good chance of helping us out here. But I don't know if he can feel that confident this year.
That's a good point. Shiv, what do you
think? Maybe. I mean, I think he's still going to go for it in situations like it's a 4th and short. Maybe not as aggressive like on your own 40 or something. So I do believe you have a point there, Rishi. But I don't know. I'm pretty high on the Titans. I just think that they ran into a really good Steelers team. And I'll say one thing about the Titans. Behind in some games, you can never blow them out. That will be a problem. They will always come back. They have this tenacity about them. So if it's a team that you're not going to be able to blow out, they're dangerous with their QB, running back, wide receiver combination, and they've got a really good head. That's a team in my estimations. I wouldn't say they're contenders with the Chiefs right now, but they're knocking on that door to get
I like that point that you make, and I know we're going to get to this later, but I want to bring it up now as something that we can a thread we can pull through all of the conversations, and it'll kind of be magnified when we get to the talks about Super Bowl contenders. But I think each year, each year begs the question of is the league going to be more about offense or more about defense this year? And I do think it fluctuates. There might be a couple of years where it stays the same, absolutely. But I do think it fluctuates. And I think this year, based on what I've seen, I would heavily lean towards it's all going to be about offense. Who can score a lot, and who can do it in a short amount of time. And in that regard, the Titans look. Especially as opposed to someone like the Bills or a team like the Bills, the Titans look incredibly strong through that lens, I suppose.
No, that's a good point. And then I just want to close the conversation on the Titans with a few points. Number one, we're talking about coaching, how good Mike Vrabel is, right?
Yeah.
But when I'm thinking about it, Mike Vrabel never really gets talked about when you talk about these recent coaches and their success. And I think the reason why is if you look at the coaches they do talk about, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Cliff Kingsbury, all young, offensive-minded coaches, these sexy coaches, that you can put on a poster. You can't put Mike Vrabel on a poster. He's like a throwback kind of guy, big guy, defensive-minded linebacker. He doesn't, he's not sexy enough for these NFL networks. So people don't talk about him. But like we've all said, his coaching is unreal. He went from a Marcus Mariota, Tennessee Titans offense system. He brings in Tannehill, has the courage to start him. He didn't really have that much success in Miami, but since he started in Tennessee, he's been one of the hottest quarterbacks in the whole NFL. He's been making all these changes with the defense and everything. So that's something I've always kind of noticed, that Mike Vrabel doesn't get the credits maybe he's due. And
my favorite Tannehill point is just to take it back randomly. The guy was a wide receiver in college, right? Maybe not the whole time.
No,
but
he was until his junior year, I believe.
Yeah, and it's just every time I think back to that and even consider it, it is so cool that he is, doing so well as a QB in the NFL, right? You see lifelong QBs can't even make a transition, and this guy here, he comes from from the X spot, and he's
Okay,
you know.
and I want to finish
But
this
anyway.
tier with the team we haven't talked about, surprisingly. And I don't know if that's because we don't respect them, we don't believe their record, or what. But that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm gonna let you guys take the floor on this first. Rishi, you go ahead and let me know if you really believe in this 6-0.
I'm going to pass it off to Shiv. I feel like I've been guiding some of these conversations with my points, so I'm going to let Shiv kick this one off. Hear his thoughts.
So the Steelers, for me, I know they're 6-0, but they're right in the same class as Tennessee and Baltimore. They're knocking on the door. If you just look at the roster alone, that defense is stacked in the front seven. I believe 4 of their linemen are top 5 in PFF rating. You got T.J. Watt on the edge. You got Stephon Tuitt. You got Cameron Hayward, and there's another guy, Michael. I forgot his last name. It starts with E, but they've got a really, really strong defensive line. And when you can control the trenches, that's a real thing. Their back end is it's not as good, but like I said, when you have the pass rush, you can make do with what you've got. In the loss of Devin Bush, I believe, the linebacker, that's really going to hurt them, I think, in the long run. But if you go onto the offensive side of the ball, look at, they got a good offensive line once again. Their weapons are ridiculous. Deontay Johnson is their number 1 wide receiver. And then you got Chase Claypool. He's looking like a star in the making. And then you throw in Connor. The real weakness for this team is probably Big Ben, which is saying a lot because he used to be the strength of this team. So that's one thing where I'm a little bit to me something that they can do this throughout the year because they've done it so far. But if you look at their schedule, I think the first 3 games are against the Giants, the Texans, and the Broncos. Those are easy teams. Granted, they beat them, but for me, it's just they beat the Titans. That's a good win. They've got to go on and beat the Ravens here and maybe another stretch. So that's why I have them in my tier 2 knocking in. If they can beat either Baltimore and or Buffalo, I think we got to really start giving this team some respect. But it's going to come down to Big Ben.
Yeah, so a couple points that I want to bounce off of that. First off, you brought up the schedule thing that I was already going to bring up, right? Giants, Broncos, Texans, all 3 dubs, with the exception of the Giants game, which honestly it was a weird game.
That was the opening Monday night game, right?
That was I'm looking at the score now, and I had no idea the Giants managed 16 points. I know Saquon had like 5 yards.
They had a garbage touchdown to Slayton, I believe, in the 4th.
Okay. Well, yeah, either.
Yeah. And then the Giants also threw a pick in the red zone.
If you look at teams that were notable that they played in the first 6 games, the Broncos at the time, this is week 2, they had Drew Lock, so we'll count them. In that game,
he got injured.
Oh, okay. Okay, then never mind. Fine.
Yep.
So that game, margin of victory, 5 points. We look at the Eagles game, which is their biggest margin of victory game, 9 points. I don't really remember how that ended, but I feel like it could have ended on something that gave them some points. I don't really know. But then the Titans game is obviously a 3-point victory. And if you look at the rest of their schedule, other than a matchup with the Ravens, 2 matchups with the Ravens and 1 with the Bills, they're probably going to get a lot of dubs. And so I definitely think they're going to be around at the end of the season. And I just don't really know if there will be a way for them unless they go undefeated against 2 Ravens matchups and the Bills. I think if other than that, it's still going to remain in my eyes a bit unproven until the playoffs. Big Ben, for him to stay healthy, he's all but immobile now, so he's going to be taking more sacks than he's probably ever taken, and he's more fragile than he's ever been. But another thing I want to talk about is this matchup they got coming up this week, right? Ravens and Steelers, right? Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. I don't want to, sidetrack the conversation, but I think it's an interesting question to ask ourselves. Which either individual player or team as a whole from both sides has more to prove. And I take this from like Undisputed or something that I watched. But they were talking about, Lamar Jackson versus Ben Roethlisberger, who's got more to prove.
Wait, you said Lamar and Big Ben?
Yeah, between Lamar and Big Ben, who's got more to prove? That does seem like an undisputed
question. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, right. It seems like a very lopsided topic.
So my thing is in that
I think it's fun to argue.
Look, Big Ben already has a couple Super Bowl rings, right? Lamar Jackson is an MVP who hasn't had any actual success in terms of wins and losses. He's had like a really good regular season, and then he's fallen short in the playoffs. He took over for Joe Flacco, led him to the playoffs, lost in the first round again. So for me, I think it's Lamar Jackson has more to prove, just because Big Ben, he's proven what he needs to prove in his career so far. He's won the rings. This is like the twilight of his career. That's what would be my take.
But okay, so what if we hyper focus the lens though on this season, right? If we do that, then it's obviously about, can Lamar Jackson even pass the ball from the pocket and be an efficient passer, and has Big Ben shown us enough already? And does he have to show us something in this game to establish that, yeah, he's got this pedigree, but that pedigree is not basically detached from the Roethlisberger that you have now?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And in that respect, I think it's a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I think it's more fair when you say it like that. All right. So,
me personally, though, I put the onus on Lamar.
Yeah, I think it's Lamar too.
So, I'd have to agree with both of you guys, because I think Big Ben, we kind of know what he is. He's playing kind of like Alex Smith, so I find that interesting, but there's not really anything to prove there. Lamar, teams have been doing something very clever on defense. They've basically gone back to a little bit of what they did last year at the beginning of the season, where they're stacking the box completely. They're playing not only the run in the middle, playing the pass right in the middle of the field, and they're forcing Lamar to throw it to the boundaries. He's been really struggling with that. The Eagles, the Bengals even did this to him, and he had a couple of horrible picks in those situations and just bad throws. So there's definitely the pressure on him, and I think even if he wins this game, he's not going to silence the critics, because it's really going to be also about the playoff.
We should get moving. We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about, but I want to say that I think this is like a very important proof point for Lamar's evolution, right? If it just the same way head coaches are forced to make statement wins, but they're forced to make adjustments at like halftime of a game, right? Lamar has seen something different, and whether or not he can adapt and kind of change his style a little bit to fit what they're giving him, or figure out how to fit his current style into what they're giving him, whatever, that'll kind of prove whether or not he is as elite as he's seemed over the past couple seasons.
Yeah, no, that's a good point there. I think whoever wins this game is going to have like a really strong case to make in terms of being that number 1 or number 2 seed in the AFC. I just want to recap our first two tiers. So we had a first tier, which was elite. Shiv and I were both on the Chiefs, Packers, Seahawks, Buccaneers. Rishi wasn't really willing to commit to a team yet in that tier, but if he did, it would be the Chiefs. In our good but category, we had those 4 teams in there for sure among all 3 of us, and then we are going to add the Steelers, the Titans, the Ravens, and potentially the Bills from the AFC side, the Rams, the Cardinals from the NFC side, and I believe Rishi and Shiv, you both would also put the 49ers in here as well. Was that right?
I think, now that I think about it, it's interesting that we didn't mention the Colts. I feel like the Colts and 49ers could contend for the same spot in that category, but we didn't mention them.
Yeah, we did not. But Shiv, you said you want the 49ers in there. So other than that, we pretty much have unanimous, more or less, teams that we think will go to the Super Bowl. They will come from that pool. Is that correct? Would you guys agree in those 2 tiers?
Yeah.
Our Super Bowl winner somewhere in those 2 tiers, Shiv. Yeah. So that's our elite tier and our good but tier. So our next one are bubble teams. So teams that right now they're kind of above or a little bit maybe below that median line of the playoffs. For me, that's the Browns, the Colts, the Bears, the Saints, 49ers, and Raiders. 2 teams that are kind of interesting here are the Saints and 49ers, because last year those were our 2 heavyweights in the conference. And this year, because of Drew Brees on the Saints, maybe he's not the Drew Brees we think he was. And then the 49ers, with the injuries and just losing that defensive line prowess that made them the unstoppable force last season, have both kind of taken a step down and are part of my bubble teams. And there's a couple interesting teams there. I know Rishi mentioned the Colts, but I'm going to let you guys take it away first and let me know what your bubble teams are and how your response to my list is. Shiv, I'm going to start with you again. So bubble teams for me are teams that right now.
Wait, so can you recap what is your bubble team definition?
Exactly. Like maybe like a little bit above that line, and there's also teams that are maybe a little bit below. So teams that are going to flip forth between those 2.
Okay, so I think of those teams, you got to look at which teams have a good record right now and can kind of sustain. Even though I potentially think a couple of them are fraudulent, so I have Cleveland, Chicago, the Raiders. I was obviously the Colts, and then I was gonna say maybe the Patriots, but they're looking like they're gonna have a fire sale soon, so
Okay.
I'm gonna keep them out of this discussion for a while. I also think the Dolphins. I think Tua is a really special player. Maybe it doesn't get off to like a great start, but I really think they're going to be a little more dangerous with him at quarterback than Ryan Fitzpatrick. So those would be my bubble teams. I also
I
think
our
all those
lists are
teams
the
have the
same
potential
again,
to make
except
the
you
playoffs because
are
they already
including the
have
Dolphins,
at
whereas I
least
did
a
not include
500
them.
record.
Rishi, what would your teams look like?
Yeah, let's see.
Mhm.
So let me, I think it'd be better for me if I just go down your list, and because I haven't watched enough games this season to really
Yeah,
say
so let's go
definitively.
Browns
But
or
the
Colts,
team I
whichever
want to
one. I know
start
you
with,
want to talk about
yeah,
both.
team I want to start with, I want to talk about the Browns. They're trash. They are fraudulent as anyone on this list. They're not going to do anything if they make it to the playoffs. If they can make it to the playoffs, I just I don't believe in it. Not Kyler Murray. Baker Mayfield is so inconsistent. And other than that off, and then you add the OBJ injury, and his usage was weird. I didn't understand it. To me, it's just nothing makes sense in Cleveland. The way the whole system works, the way they perform, I don't know. That's a faulty 5-2. And as a Raiders fan, I got to say, if we take an L this week, I am going to be thoroughly, thoroughly disappointed. Um, as for the Colts, I also haven't watched a lot of that team, but I have, heard great things about their defense apparently. Um, but I want to ask you guys, you two, I mean, what does Philip Rivers
Trash.
look like this season?
No, he's really bad. He plays football like old people text. Like it's very like
Not good.
fragmented. It doesn't make any sense, and you're just like, we're just gonna move on. It's like that. That's how he plays football now. He's played football like that for quite a bit. But
Right.
his move to Indianapolis, I think people thought like, oh, the Colts are just a quarterback away. But Philip Rivers is not that quarterback.
And I also one of the other things that hasn't made sense for me is the
Not
the
anymore.
performance of T.Y. Hilton, who at one time seemed like he could break into that category of receivers that might be considered elite or right on the bubble of being elite, but he is nearly fallen off the face of the earth for all intents and purposes. And yeah, so I don't know, those two teams, the Browns and the Colts. Not seeing a lot that I love out of them. I think those records are a little bit propped up by a couple of wins. But the Dolphins is a team I like that you mentioned, Shiv, because when we also consider them in the context of their division, they can easily beat the Jets any given day. They can. I think they can challenge the Patriots. Right? They lost that game in the beginning of the season. Yeah, they lost a game in the beginning of the season, but that's a far different
They get 'em at
Patriots
home.
team than the one that exists now. And even the Bills, man, again, there's a big wild card with Tua. And if they do make a step forward from where they were at with Fitzpatrick, right, then I think they can contend with the Bills. I mean, the Bills haven't necessarily, been locked down or blowing people out. I mean, they have blown some people out, but nonetheless, I think the Dolphins was an interesting call. Who were the other teams that
if
you
look
mentioned,
at my
Rudy?
list, half the teams are teams that currently already have like a good record, quote unquote good record, but teams I think are going to fall from there. And then the other half are teams that with an okay record I think is going to rise. So those teams are the Browns, the Colts, which we already kind of talked about, the Bears, also a pretty good record, but another team that I think is going to fall. The Saints, who have a decent record, but I don't really believe in them, but they'll probably end up making the playoffs. 49ers, who have a mediocre record, but I think they're going to rise. And then the Raiders, who are somewhere in between there.
Right.
So Browns, Colts, Bears, Saints, 49ers, and Raiders.
Yeah, I don't know. The Saints thing, Michael Thomas keeps perplexing me. So as long as that's, yeah, exactly, and as long as that's the case, I don't even know if they can make the playoffs because
it does help having
Drew
7
Brees is
teams
already
now instead of 6. But with the NFC West being so strong, it could be all wildcard teams just come from that division.
I mean, what's their record? Okay, they're 4-2, but let's see who do the Saints have coming up.
They have Chicago coming up.
They go to the Bears, they go to the Bucks, they host the Niners. After that, it's not too bad, but they do have a late late season meeting with the Chiefs. So I don't know. I mean, I think these next 3 games are going to be huge proof points for New Orleans, right? I mean, nobody expects their defense to be any good. It's all going to be on the offense.
Yep.
And if Drew Brees, I'm assuming, right, is going to be the biggest component, if he can somehow put together something spectacular, then yeah, I'd consider them. But other than that, I wouldn't. But before I hand it over, I do have to at least comment on the Raiders because I'll say this much, man. We look very average. I'd like to believe in them, but all I'll say is this. Eric Harris, I am not better than you. In fact, I'm much worse than you. But I have spent so much time on sidelines as a result of my talent that I know what good looks like. And it is very, very far from what you look like. So please, put your resume out there and find another job because you are the single worst safety in the league. Raiders, I don't know. I don't think that this is their year to do anything spectacular. I think they may challenge the playoffs, but I don't know if I see them getting in. They have the potential to win a lot of good games, but potential doesn't mean a dub.
Shiv, do you have any closing thoughts on the bubble teams tier before we move on?
Yeah, so I want to say really quick about the Colts. I think their quarterback is going to hold them back, but they have a really strong team everywhere else. They got this defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus, who's from the Cowboys. We should have kept him. So that's one thing with the Colts. The Dolphins also, their Achilles heel in that race against Buffalo is going to be the offensive line. I think that's really going to be a problem. They've got a lack of talent there. And Rishi, I'll say, as far as your Raiders go,
yeah, that's true.
Up till week 8, they've had the toughest schedule according to PFF. So, and it's looking like it's going to get a whole lot easier. I don't have the schedule in front of me right now, but I will say I think you guys can make the playoffs despite having a not so good defense yet again. That offense is good enough to carry you. And I think with the addition of Henry Ruggs, Carr is finally taking advantage.
I think really what I'm seeing
even
is
if it's not that often.
The Raiders usually in most seasons their own biggest enemy is themselves, and with that absolute debacle of the O-line last week, where they all got sent home or whatever happened there, those kinds of things. I don't know. It's a weird season. They're in a brand new city. I just see too many distractions and things like that that are going to hold them back. And again, Eric Harris, absolute garbage. I will attribute at least 2 to 2.5 scores a game to the opponent on plays that he busts coverage or gets absolutely burned to a crisp. I mean, God, put the guy's highlight reel on or game film on, and I guarantee you will see whatever your most recent meal was come up.
All right, so that's going to do for bubble teams. Essentially, all the teams we've talked about so far are teams that we think are going to eventually make up those 14 teams, 7 from the AFC, 7 from the NFC, that will represent those conferences in the playoffs. And then every team that we're going to talk about now going forward are teams that we don't think essentially are going to be able to make the playoffs. So our next year is the bad but watchable / still entertaining. So for me, this is the Dolphins. The Tua storyline. They're a pretty decent team. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but anytime you have a rookie quarterback that's pretty exciting, like Tua, I want to watch. So I got the Dolphins, the Chargers with Justin Herbert, the Patriots, just because the Patriots are always going to be interesting, even though I don't think they're very good. The Lions, because Matt Stafford can make any game kind of interesting. The Texans, because like Stafford, Watson is one of those kind of quarterback talents that it's always fun to watch, and he's always going to put up points. The Bengals, similar with the Chargers thing with Joe Burrow over there, and the Panthers, because for whatever reason, they are always in every game. Every game this year for them has been a close one, including some impressive games against the Buccaneers, who we've all said is a pretty damn good football team, and then the Saints, who, while they might not be as good as we thought they would be this season, they're still a 4-2 ball club. So those are my teams: the Dolphins, the Chargers, the Patriots, the Lions, Texans, Bengals, Panthers. Rishi, I'm going to go to you first. What do you see about this list that I have? Anything you would change? Maybe you don't think the Lions are too interesting, or if there's anyone else you would want to add to this group?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty disinterested in this category of football teams. I think perhaps next year or the year after that. I think maybe that's a bit more of an interesting conversation.
Like potential, they have teams with potential.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of the teams with potential, they have a very similar architecture framework, right? Young QB. Some of them have new head coaches or relatively new head coaches. A lot of those same teams also have decently exciting offensive weapons. So I think, that's an interesting, right? Because you look at it's Tua versus Joe Burrow versus
Herbert.
Versus Herbert, and then I think there's probably one more team in that mix that has a relatively new QB. But as for that list, I can't really contend with you there. Those teams seem to be in a lot of close games.
I don't expect us to talk about these teams too much because they're at the bottom of our list for a reason.
I mean, just not a lot of closing comments on them.
Now I'm with you there. Shiv, any team you want to add that we know isn't very good, but you still think is fun to watch before we move on to the ugly category?
Well, so first I'll say of the teams that are not good this year that I'm kind of watching because I'm interested to see what they could be next year. I agree with you, Bengals, Chargers, the Panthers. Those are kind of the three teams that I'm really looking at to maybe make a jump depending on how their offseason goes. But I will say one thing. If you want to throw in a team that's bad but it's fun to watch, you got to include the Falcons. Their games are wild. I mean, they've had now 4 games where they could have blown the 99% chance to win, and they blew 3 of those. They almost did it again with the Carolina one. I actually lost money because
I just want to say, Young Ho Koo,
I enjoy watching those
number one kicker in the
13 points the other day. That was good for me. We're going to go to the ugly category. I don't want to spend really any time on this other than who we think is going to get Trevor Lawrence. So for me, that's going to be a competition between the Broncos, Jaguars, Jets, NFC East, and the Vikings. Who do we think gets Trevor Lawrence?
We get to include
but maybe I'll say, because I think we all know it's the Jets. So who do you think is going to get the number 2 pick? I'll say that, because I think we're all on board with the Jets being the worst team.
Number 2 pick?
Jags, Jets, Broncos, NFC East, Vikings. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Jags too, mainly because, they have, one win, and that was week 1. Since then, they've got all losses. So I think Minshew's
hurt. Vikings are 1-5?
Yeah, but wow. They got to be better than that. I think they got to be better than the record, just like the Texans.
No, they are better than that, but how does that happen?
Just slightly. Well, it's kind of twofold with the Vikings. Yeah. One thing is that their roster on the defensive side of the ball is really depleted. Danielle Hunter's out for the year.
He didn't get traded. He got
traded. They lost Xavier Rhodes, who's playing well now. Right. Okay. But anyhow, I believe Anthony Barr is out for the season. So they got injuries on the defensive side. Their offense is a little bit suspect to begin with. But I think also they've had a few tough teams to play with.
As for the team spot, Rudy,
so they might be
disagree with you.
A game and
a
half
probably be the Jags. They're pretty terrible. And Minshew, I think, recently got hurt or is going to be hurt for at least a week or two.
They're
but
to some degree, for sure.
My takeaway is this: I want to see a great prospect go to at least a good team or a place where they got a chance to succeed. I will very confidently stake my opinion on the fact that if Trevor Lawrence goes to either the Jags or the Jets, he's not going to pan out to be much of anything.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what always happens.
I just think it's
whoever gets the number 1 pick.
It's just so dysfunctional. Awful. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, either way, I just want to close out my fan.
I actually disagree with you. Especially, so here's my thing. Yeah, so here's my thing with the Jets in particular. They're garbage this year. They're probably going to go 0-16. But I think they can make the rebound. So because they have some of the right pieces in place as far as going forward. Their GM, Joe Douglas, he's won, I think, 2 or 3 Super Bowls. So he, I think, is a really good GM and can do some things. He's just been given a bad situation. Adam Gase is gone. We know they're probably going to get someone like Eric Bieniemy or maybe bring a college coach in. And look, if you got to look at the teams that have drafted number 1 overall recently and look at where they are now. Look at the Cardinals. They got the right head coach. They got the right quarterback, and now they're 5-2. I think the Bengals will make a jump next year. It's going to depend on their coach and if they can acquire a little more talent. So I think if Trevor Lawrence goes to the Jets, they're going to make a comeback. And look, in the past decade, there's not a lot of teams that have made the AFC Championship game, right? Because the Patriots have made like 7 of those. The Jets have made them twice with Mark Sanchez. So I don't think they're as bad as this year is going. And I think if they get Trevor Lawrence and they have a ton of draft picks right now,
my
trading
thing
away
with the
Jamal
Jets
Adams
and this whole kind
and
of
a couple
argument
other
should
players,
Trevor
I
Lawrence
think they can make a
go back to
comeback.
Clemson if Jets have the number 1 pick is I think now in the day and age we are in the TikTok generation, whatever, our attention spans are so limited and we want results so fast that we forget that Peyton Manning was like 1 in 15 his first season in the NFL. He led the league in interceptions his first 3 years. If a quarterback did that now, they wouldn't play again. Baker's only in his 3rd year, and we're still expecting so much from him. Obviously, the eye test shows us that Baker's not Peyton Manning, but we expect answers and like results so quickly these days that I think we're expecting Trevor Lawrence to come and the Jets to be good like that. And if they're not, that means Lawrence sucks. But then again, I see where you're coming from too, because the Jets are so dysfunctional right now that you don't know what that can do to a young man. And I'm gonna let you respond to that. Real quick.
You see Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold is a talented QB.
Yeah. No,
right?
for sure.
He's a talented QB, but the guy is, he looks like he's fighting for his skin.
But I think part of that though
and
is the Adam Gase issue. We saw what Adam Gase made Tannehill look like. As soon as he leaves, Adam Gase, Tannehill becomes a top quarterback. So who knows? Maybe that's the issue. Maybe Darnold can get better, and maybe Lawrence lands there without Adam Gase and he does fine. Who knows?
The other thing is that the Jets have had a recent history of making these poor leadership decisions. I mean, what was the last good coach they had? Even
It's been a while.
Was that even under the same GM?
No way.
Rex Ryan. No. It was a couple GMs ago. So let me talk about the GM situation a little bit. They had, I forgot who it was, his name, but they did not have a good GM, and the Jets made a poor decision to let him draft. I think it was 2 years ago. They let him draft, and then they fired him right after that. So the overall management of the Jets will probably hinder them from getting to the promised land. But I believe you get Trevor Lawrence and you get a good young creative head coach like an Eric Bieniemy, someone like that. I believe this Jets team can make it back to the playoffs definitely and look kind of like the Arizona Cardinals. Whether they get to the Super Bowl and win it all, that's really going to be tough to decide because I think the Jets are a little dysfunctional at the top. Their owners making America great again over in Britain right now. So who knows about that? There might be a ceiling on them, just like I think there's a ceiling on the Bengals to win it all. But Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, respectively, are going to take that.
I think that's going to cap for our tiers. I want to move into more of a lightning round situation. So our first topic is I want you to give me your most overrated and underrated NFL team this year. So don't worry about the tiers we just did. Just think about kind of what the general narrative is of teams and where we kind of see teams talking about, on radio shows, TV shows, the newspaper, whatever. Teams that you think are kind of overvalued right now, and that teams, if they were a stock, maybe you would want to buy now because they're kind of undervalued right now, but you think they're going to make a boom the rest of the season. So who would your teams be? I'll start with you, Rishi.
Overvalued. I kind of, I'm gonna stir the pot a little bit here. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are overvalued, and to give a bit of a contentious take here, I see them as first-round knockouts. I don't know who they would even play prospectively, but I just have a gut feeling about it. If you asked me to defend the argument, I couldn't really give you any sort of stats or support, but that's just a feeling I have. Okay. Other than that, the obvious pick for overrated is the Cleveland Browns, right? That's just an easy target. But for underrated, you know what? I'll say this. I'll say the Arizona Cardinals obviously are getting a lot of buzz, but I say they're underrated in the sense that I think they could be 10 times better than they are right now. And I stake a lot of that on the fact that I still don't think Kyler Murray and that offense is clicking on all cylinders. And I think if they could get there, with the emergence of some talent like, Budda Baker on the other side of the ball, and even the young draft pick at linebacker, he's been playing decently well. I think that team, it could really raise some out. So I don't know. Those are my picks.
So you got Tampa overrated and underrated. You're doing the Arizona Cardinals. Pretty interesting. Both teams.
Yeah, Tampa and Cleveland.
Oh, and Cleveland. That's correct. Yeah. No, yeah, Tampa and Cleveland for your overrated, and then your underrated Arizona.
Overrated.
Yeah. Shit, What about you? Your overrated and your underrated team so far at the end.
So for my overrated,
but they still have a good record.
This qualifies, but I have the Saints as overrated. I know none of us are really high on them, but I still, and I still think the general public. You go look at any of the analysts on ESPN or NFL Network or whatever, and they're all about, hey, the Saints, they're not as bad as we think. Drew Brees can still play. Yeah, sure, but all the kind of drama, I guess, that's going on in that locker room with Michael Thomas, and then Drew Brees is not the same quarterback. They're still a good team, but they're overrated in my opinion. And I'm going to make an interesting pick for my underrated team. I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens, and this is why. They're a really good team, and no one doubts that. But I think people are kind of they're kind of looking away from the Ravens. They're kind of done from them after we saw what happened last year. But they give me a similar vibe to what the Chiefs did the year before, where obviously we know last year the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes got hurt. They were playing okay at the start of the year. They kind of turned on at the end, and then they won the Super Bowl. The Ravens, I think, are kind of in that same category where this year their offense is not being as efficient. Their defense is also not being as efficient. Lamar looks like he's been a little banged up, not throwing the ball well outside. But I think as we get later into the season, I think the Ravens are going to turn it on, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So that's where I'd go with the Ravens as my underrated team, even though they're still looked upon highly.
Me,
I just think
overrated is going to
we're
be
looking away from
Seattle.
them a
And this
little
is kind
too
of interesting
much.
because I do think
What about
Seattle
you,
still
Rudy?
goes and wins the NFC, during the playoffs because I think Russell Wilson is that good. But I think because of their defense, they're going to run into a lot of issues during the regular season, and I think Russell Wilson will have to put on that Superman cape for them in the playoffs. Their defense might be the worst in the league, except the Cowboys, to be honest, in terms of yards, in terms of points, and everything. And you just can't expect Russell Wilson to be as good as he has been because it's such an unreal level. There's just no way anyone can sustain it. I have the Seahawks as my most overrated team. It would make a little bit more sense if they beat the Cardinals last week because that kind of exposed some of their flaws. If the Cardinals were able to kind of lose that game, I think people would view the Seahawks even higher. Probably be number one in most people's power rankings, and maybe number two.
Well, I actually think that actually proves your point because Wilson did not have a great game against the Cardinals. He threw 3 picks. One wasn't his fault, but he didn't have a great game and they lost. Russell Wilson has to go off for that team to win. So I
Rishi,
agree with
we're
you
having
that
trouble hearing
we're
you.
overrating the Seahawks slightly. But what's your
can't hear you.
underrated team?
And then my underrated team is going to be the Chargers, actually.
Yeah.
So this is a team that's not in the playoffs yet, but I think with Herbert, they have really shown that they can be in any ball game, kind of like the Panthers in a way. But we knew the Chargers roster was very, very good, and they're just missing that quarterback, which kind of why they moved off Philip Rivers. I think we can hear you again now, Rishi. And then
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. And
Okay,
now Herbert has put them into games I think with the Bucks, and I'm not sure if they played the Saints yet or not. Yeah, they did on Monday Night Football. They had a big lead against the Saints, who are at least a 4-2 football team, and then they almost beat the Buccaneers as well. So he's really coming into his own. I think he's only going to get better as the season progresses. So I think my underrated team is the Chargers now, a sneaky team.
And they're looking to get Eckler back.
Exactly, a sneaky team that I think can really lean into the playoffs and maybe capture that 7th seed. So who knows? But that's my overrated, underrated team. Let's move on to our next talking point, lightning round MVP race. Who is your number 1 and number 2 in terms of the MVP candidacy? Some of the guys that have been mentioned are Josh Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, Russell Wilson, and Rodgers. Give me your top 2. Rishi, I'll start with you first.
Russell Wilson, hands down, number 1 for me. Other than that, though, I'm not sure. I think it's probably another quarterback. I'm trying to decide who I think has really been putting the team on their back. I don't know. I almost want to say Tannehill just because the way the guy is playing is incredible, but I don't know if
the MVP is essentially an award that they give to the quarterback of the team who had the best record, who was the most impressive during the regular season. Last year that was Lamar. Year before was Mahomes. So yeah. It's kind of based off of that. So I like where you at with Wilson, and I forgot who you said your number 2 would be.
Yeah, so I guess kind of through the vein of what we're talking about, right? The impressive quarterback play. Obviously, Russell Wilson's been incredibly impressive, but I also think Tannehill has been incredibly impressive. But contrary to the Russell Wilson scenario, I don't think you can attribute all of the Titans' success, or nearly all of it, to solely Ryan Tannehill. But
you do have the Seahawks, though.
But the Seahawks, you absolutely can. Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention, I know this is going back a second, but that Cardinals game, they were without Chris Carson, correct? Yeah, so I don't know. That may have played a factor. But yeah, Shiv, what are your thoughts?
So I've actually got a definitive top three. Russell Wilson is the number one guy on that list, and I think what even makes a stronger case is that they lost to the Cardinals. I was just telling Rudy this, but they lost to the Cardinals, and Russell Wilson wasn't great. He has to be great every game for this team to win, and that to me defines most valuable player. I also think the headline that he has never received an MVP vote is going to help this year. If he continues to play lights out, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. He's probably going to win the MVP. As far as 2 and 3 go, my number 2 is Patrick Mahomes right now. Yeah, he's just playing too lights out for me not to have him there. He could potentially be number 1 if the season were to end today. But I think the narrative, people aren't going to be really looking at him as much because we already gave him the MVP. He won the Super Bowl last year. So that would be my number 2. My number 3, and I don't know if this is controversial, but it for me, it has to be Aaron Rodgers. I know he had a bad game against the Bucs. He looked really poor, but he's playing really well. As you know, he only has 2 picks this year, both against the Bucs. So that one game is probably going to keep him from winning the MVP.
I just wanted to make one comment on
Shiv's in that race.
Top 3 there. I can't really disagree with you on Aaron Rodgers. He has been playing phenomenally, but I will say the only thing that takes away from, I think, his potential for the award is the fact that he does have that pretty solid run game from Aaron Jones, and he's also got arguably the best wide receiver in the game, but has been playing without him for many, many weeks. So,
well, yeah, so Devontae's been out, and then Aaron Jones, he's also missed last game. He's going to miss this game. The thing with Jones is he's more of a threat because of his versatility to catch the ball than he is necessarily to run the ball like Derrick Henry. So that's my only thing. With Rodgers is also, I have it right here, he's the 3rd most valuable QB when it comes to spread points. So if Aaron Rodgers were not to play, that would be an 8.5 point difference behind Russell Wilson, who's 9, and Patrick Mahomes, who's 9.5. And I think that really says something to how valuable Aaron Rodgers is.
Aaron Rodgers and then Tom Brady. I think Aaron Rodgers is very close to Russell Wilson, though, and I think whichever team between the Seahawks and the Packers finishes as that number 1 seed is going to be the guy who ends up winning it. Mahomes has been playing well. He's been playing well enough to be in this conversation, but I think kind of what Shiv alluded to, that voter fatigue of him winning just a couple of years ago and him being, in the storylines last year winning the Super Bowl MVP, it just means his threshold is so high that he almost has he set that bar for himself so high that anything he does now, unless it's like a freaking behind the back, backwards, blindfolded pass to win the game, nobody's impressed anymore. Which is just kind of how society and how sports media is now, and it's whatever. And then, like Shiv said, so Russell Wilson hasn't gotten a single vote in his MVP whole career, and I think that's going to play a factor in people's heads, and it's just going to be another narrative, and that's what the NFL is.
I really think there's no reason Russell Wilson should not win it this year. I mean, he seems like such a distinctive number 1.
And they're finally really throwing the ball around. I mean, I don't think it's even close for passing touchdowns with him and the guy, whoever's number 2. It's probably at least 4 touchdowns behind him. So yeah, I think we'll all kind of agree with Russ as our front runner here, and then maybe Aaron Rodgers somewhere in there, maybe a Mahomes. But yeah, I think we're all on the same page there. Okay, I want to move on to bold predictions. Rishi, I know you're pretty excited about this one, but I'm actually going to let Shiv take the reins first. Shiv, what are your kind of bold predictions? So basically anything that deep down it probably isn't going to happen, but you think the chance of it actually happening is higher than maybe people think. No,
I'm going to say bold prediction, Miami Dolphins win the division. I don't know if that is a bold prediction necessarily.
High on the Dolphins.
Yeah, he's been all Dolphins all day.
Yeah. Who was high on the Dolphins? Oh, me. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the whole thing is that we got to see how Tua plays. I still think that if he had not had that hip injury, that if he doesn't go to Cincinnati just because the narrative of Joe Burrow from there and winning the championship, he definitely goes to Washington at number 2. But look, the Dolphins do have a lack of talent, but I think if Tua is that special guy and it clicks right away, I think they're going to make a comeback in the division as far as my bold take would go, because Buffalo has also shown some signs of weakness. They failed to beat the Jets by 8 points last week.
Yeah,
they were not good against the Chiefs.
They haven't been able to close out games and things like that, too, that you like to see from good teams.
They got blown out by the Titans. Right. I know I had Josh Allen as one of my MVP candidates after like the first 4 weeks, but he's reverted back to what he was last year, and that's a little concerning when you think about how that end of the Houston Texans playoff game played. So I don't know. I
Rishi,
guess
I'll let you
off the
take it
spot,
away.
my bold prediction is Miami Dolphins win the
Yeah.
AFC
I kind of
East.
exposed one of my bold takes already. I don't know how bold it was, but I really don't buy into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think Tom Brady he's just a 40-whatever-year-old Tom Brady. Like, they didn't do anything really last year. And even though he's got all the talent around him this year, they can hardly stay healthy. You're adding Antonio Brown, who is literally a catalyst for self-implosion. I don't really like the Bucs. I don't buy into it at all.
Do you think they win the division? Like, where do you think they blow up?
No, I think they're a first-round playoff out.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think they will, by the end of the season, and at least at the entryway to the playoffs, I think they will be looked at as probably a decent favorite to go deep in the playoffs.
And then just to kind of see what the hypothetical would look like, if the playoffs ended right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be the 3 seed, and then they would be playing, actually, let me see, they would be playing the Arizona Cardinals in the playoffs in that first week.
See, and if the Arizona Cardinals start clicking on all cylinders on offense like I was talking about, I think that matchup becomes very risky for the Bucs. But at the way it currently stands, their defense has been pretty outstanding against a lot of good offenses. So they do have that going for them. But again, I don't know. I don't know if I really buy into the hype. I think a lot of it's generated by the fact that it's Tom Brady. And so it's like those are the expectations that follow him wherever he goes. Obviously, I got to hype up my hometown squad, even though I talked kind of poorly on them earlier. I think the Raiders are a team that could surprise some people because, like I said, they are the only ones that usually stand in their own way. So if they can really just, button things up and tighten down the screws, they have a lot of talent, and they do have to figure some things out on the defensive side of the ball. But if going back to that thread I was trying to pull through all of our conversations, I think it's an offensive league this year, and that's the side of the ball where they've shown the most promise. So I think they can rely on that to get them into the playoffs, and if they can get into the playoffs, I think they're a team that could absolutely make it out of the first round.
Yeah, I kind of like both those bold predictions that you guys kind of put there. Mine are, one is centered around the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys don't win a single game the rest of the season, and here's why. I think going into the season, we all had expectations that the Cowboys had a lot of talent. But a lot of this happens for really no reason. If you look at the actual roster, they don't really have talent. It's not there.
I just got to say this: the only people that have those kinds of expectations of the Cowboys are Cowboys fans. Everybody else in the league knows what it is for what it is. The Cowboys are 8-8 again.
That was
baby.
true. ESPN wouldn't be talking about us. FSN was not talking about us. But that wasn't true. Regardless, though, even when we had Dak Prescott, we had to come back from behind by like 30 points and get an onside kick to beat the Falcons, like the 1-6, maybe 2-6 now Falcons. Okay, so we were not a good team to begin with, even with Dak Prescott donning that Superman cape and playing with Russell Wilson-like character.
I know you got to mention that Browns game too, right?
I was going to mention the Browns game because that was another blowout. So, and the Browns we know aren't very good. So all these teams are beating us. The Giants should have beat us. The Washington football team, who nobody thinks is good, beat the heck out of us. So we're not.
They blew
our defense
it
is
out.
one of the worst defenses of all time. Our offensive line is miserable. Ezekiel Elliott is obese, and our quarterback is a 7th rounder from James Madison University. I know you have Zeke on your fantasy team, Rishi, but this is not a time to defend.
I just want to say
he is slow. He cannot move, and this offensive line is not going to be.
He looked so promising, to start the season. And yeah, I agree with you now. I don't know what happened to the guy.
If you have a small scat back, Darren Sproles, a 5'6", 180-pound guy, he can get through that hole that the Cowboys O-line right now can pave the way for him. But with Zeke, you need to have a freaking 18-wheeler type strip in order to get that fat boy down the field.
It also doesn't help that Mike McCarthy or whoever the OC is in Dallas, Kellen Moore. It doesn't help that the play calling is so prescriptive that whoever's at QB might as well get up to the line and go, it's a run, Hut. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it feels like.
Go ahead, Shiv. I'll say my.
Look. I've got another bold take, and this may not happen, but I think Sunday Night Football, Ben DiNucci, he gets hurt, and in comes Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. He dons the suit. He had a
So did
he's
Matt
had a
Flynn.
400-yard
Matt
game.
Flynn had
I
like a
think,
500-yard
in
game.
this
That's
league.
what got him that big
He
contract.
puts on the kick and he comes back in.
Then he disappeared into the
Oh,
abyss.
wow.
Yeah, so that's my first bold prediction. My second one is that the Arizona Cardinals win the
Me too,
division.
yeah.
They actually get in front of the Seahawks. I think with a team like Kyler and like the way, first of all, like Rishi said, they're not even gelling completely. Kyler's not really
No.
completing a high percentage of his footballs. Like
Not at all.
Once that gets going, once Hopkins gets more integrated.
I also think if they can get Chase Edmonds to take over
Chase
Kenyon
Edmonds
Drake's
looks a lot
workload.
better than Drake has, and he did that last season too. So I think he continues that as Drake recovers from his injury. I think Arizona's a team to watch out for, and that's not because I think Seattle's offense has anything wrong with them. I think they're great, but I think their defense is just so bad that it's going to open up that hole for a team like Arizona to kind of swoop in there. Maybe the Niners.
Well, I kind of think Arizona and Seattle are more or less the same team right now.
I think
right?
Arizona's defense is just a little bit better, and maybe
No, but that's what I'm
maybe
saying.
Seattle's coaching is a little
Yeah.
bit better. But I think at the end of the day,
Arizona's
it's the
defense is
people
definitely
on
better.
the field that's going to make the biggest difference. So for that reason, I give the slight edge to the Arizona Cardinals. So those are all kind of all our bold predictions. I want to wrap up with what we think our Super Bowl is going to look like in February, if and hopefully when we have it. I'll go ahead and start first, and I think my AFC team and the only AFC team out of my elite category from before, that's the Kansas City Chiefs. I think when Rishi said that this season is all about offense, he was 100% correct. And by that, we talked about other teams there in the AFC, like how the Titans, they always come back. They never get blown out. And to me, what this means, like in a mathematical or just like a life term, is margin of error. If you have a team that has a big margin of error, you're going to win more football games because you can win a football game in more ways. That's what the Kansas City Chiefs do. When you have a guy like Mahomes and a coach like Andy Reid, you have such a big margin of error that even if you mess up one time, two times, three times, you can still win the football game. In life, if you are born in a great city with a great education system, great parents, a lot of money in the bank, you can mess up so many times. You can go to college, drop out, go back to college. It doesn't matter. You can fail 100 times before you're 25, and you can still get a job at your daddy's company. Okay, that's what the Kansas City Chiefs are. It doesn't matter. They can have all those resources and play well and be successful, or they can mess up in the first quarter, second quarter, be down by 20, and Mahomes can lead them back to a victory. So the Chiefs, for that reason, are my team in the AFC, and I think they're going to go against a team in Seattle who doesn't have necessarily all those luxuries because they have Russell Wilson, who does do some of what Mahomes can do, but his defense is so bad. He doesn't have a Tyrann Mathieu-like playmaker to force some turnovers. He has to do everything by himself. But I still think he gets past the NFC, meets Mahomes in the Super Bowl down there in Tampa, and Mahomes gets his second consecutive Super Bowl ring and Super Bowl MVP. What do you think, Rishi?
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I mean, from the AFC side of things, I can't really see the Ravens, if anyone, challenging the Chiefs. Maybe the Titans, if that happens somehow. But again, I think, a lot of things have to go right, and a lot of things have for the Titans, and a lot of things have to go wrong for the Chiefs. However, I don't know that the Chiefs did get some exposed by the Raiders and somehow lost that game. So whether or not that was a fluke or if that's something that will still exist throughout the season, we'll see. But yeah, I think Kansas City at this point is the clear favorite from the AFC. And I like the Seattle pick, but I think I'm going to go with Rodgers and the Packers instead. And I say that only because even though it may just be a marginal difference, I do think the Packers have a little bit more talent on defense, at least as they currently stand. Chris Carson's variable health, contrast that with Aaron Jones looking pretty solid. And then, as always, if Devontae Adams stays healthy throughout the rest of the season, I mean, he is an elite of elite receivers. The way the guy gets separation, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is basically always going to be able to get that ball off. And you've seen the emergence of some guys like Tanyan, who I know trained with George Kittle, what's his name? Kittle. Yeah, so I know that they've trained together. So that guy's he's pretty good. But I don't know. I like the Packers. I like Rodgers. I like what the defense has over the Seahawks defense. And I think it's very close nonetheless. It's not definitive at all.
The Packers are my number 2 team for sure in the NFC. Shiv, what do you think? Super Bowl, February in Tampa. Who do you like? We're all on the team.
So AFC, I think I agree with you guys. Kansas City's the clear-cut favorite. I think the only team that can have a chance to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs is probably the Steelers. And the reason I say this is because, the Ravens are not going to beat them. The Chiefs have their number. The Titans and the Bills defense is too porous for them to beat the Chiefs. I think the Steelers have some key components to be able to put pressure on Mahomes, maybe cover the middle of the field somewhat. You're not going to stop Mahomes, but I think they can also match him with the amount of receiving threat and the ability to run the ball. That's what the Steelers have, but I would still take the Chiefs to win the AFC. The NFC is interesting. Rudy, I know we talked about it at the beginning of the year that I like the Seahawks and the Ravens to get into the Super Bowl. The Seahawks, to me, I think Russell Wilson's going to win MVP, but I think it's going to be a little bit like what Rodgers had to deal with in the mid-2010s. That defense is, I think, going to be too bad for them to win 2 straight games in the playoffs, although I still think they can do it. And we've seen recently that whoever wins MVP, maybe this is correlation, not causation, but they haven't been able to make the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson lost last year to the Titans.
In overtime.
Mahomes lost to the Patriots.
To your point, though, I think that's also kind of what drove my decision behind the Packers.
Right.
So Russ, like we just said, has to have a good game, a better than good game, every game nearly for them to win, and that's not going to change in the playoffs. Yeah. And so to consider that he would have to put together 2 to 3 victories of that magnitude and performances of that magnitude to even get them to the Super Bowl, it's just tough. It's tough.
Right, so that's where I do have the Seahawks in that mix, but I would have to roll with the Packers right now. I do think, for all those points that you said, Rishi, I think Jair Alexander might be the number 1 corner in this year. So I think that's a real asset for them to have. They have Kenny Clark, they have Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith on the D-line. So I think I would have the Packers. I will say it's interesting. If it's about matchups in the playoffs, if the Packers have to play the Bucs, I think the Bucs will beat them and they'll make the Super Bowl. But again, it's between the Green Bay Packers, the Seahawks, and the Buccaneers in the NFC. Right now, I have the Packers with the Seahawks and the Bucs close behind. If the Packers play the Seahawks, I believe they make it to the final round, the Super Bowl.
The interesting thing is,
if they play the Bucs, I think it'll be the Bucs.
Like if my bold prediction flops, which there's a good chance it does, and the Buccaneers are around, I think they're the most complete team, right, from the NFC. Maybe not based on performance at this point, but on paper and potential-wise,
for sure.
On the offensive side of the ball, they haven't shown the explosiveness as those 2 other teams we've been talking about. But on paper, you add AB. On paper, they have that potential, and their defense has been showing its from the in that division. If they don't get beat in the first round, I think unfortunately they'll probably be around.
And who do you guys have winning your Super Bowl? So I already said I had the Chiefs. I can't remember what y'all said. Right. In your matchups, who wins?
So if it's the Chiefs and the Packers for me, I'm going to go with the Packers. Just maybe to play a little bit devil's advocate, I think they'll be healthy at that time. They'll be able to match up with the Chiefs a little bit.
You're going to trust Matt LaFleur
slow them down just enough
against Andy Reid with a 2-week advantage?
I think the real thing is that. Yeah, I know it doesn't sound great right now, but I think the difference is that if you look at the Chiefs and the 49ers and then the Chiefs and the Packers potentially, I think Aaron Rodgers will be able to make that drive at the end to win the game. So, it could go either way. I think the spread would be a pick 'em. So I'll go with the Packers over the Chiefs.
Right now. Honestly, I have a tough time deciding that anybody can really beat the Chiefs if they are there at the end. Because I think if they're there at the end, that means that they've remained more or less healthy, unless they lose someone in the game prior to the Super Bowl. But I don't know, and if you want to get in a shootout, which it would probably be if it was Packers-Chiefs, the last, even as good as Rodgers and the Packers and Devontae and Aaron Jones are, the last team you want to see in a shootout are the Kansas City Chiefs. And Andy Reid, he hasn't even shown all of the tricks in his bag, and he won't show them all throughout the regular season. So I just think if they make it to the Super Bowl, that team is magnificent. I have to give it to them. So I'm going to go with them.
Yeah, and I think regardless, we kind of talked about when we talked about the tiers, we had so many teams between the elite, good, but, and then even half of those bubble teams. So we know 14 of those teams are going to be in the playoffs, and there's 14 very, very relevant teams this year. There's no real clear-cut favorite other than maybe the Chiefs. So I think we're all going to be in tune for some really good playoff games. We're going to get an extra playoff game, I think, in the first round because of that additional 7th seed, and then the 2nd seed doesn't get a bye anymore, so they'll be in that first opening week. Only the 1st seed does. So I think we're going to get another playoff game in each conference. That's 2. I think it's going to be really fun. But I think we're all pretty much on the Chiefs, except maybe Shiv's leaning towards the Packers because he wants to be a contrarian, which is fine. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah,
I think that's going
I
to
didn't
do
want
it for
all of us to pick the Chiefs.
this episode. Do you guys have anything else you want to close out on? Anything crazy you might be looking at before week 8, before we close out this episode?
Do we think AB ends the season closer to 650, 700 yards or 150? I'd have to say 150.
150. I think he's going to get arrested or some shit.
He's going to get arrested?
He's definitely going to get arrested, bro.
Yeah.
Bro,
Well,
did you hear that Tom Brady, you guys know
having,
Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker?
Yeah.
Tom Brady called Tony Robbins to get in contact with Antonio Brown to mentor him this year. So he would be ready for this. Tom Brady and Antonio Brown got some weird-ass relationship. If you guys remember,
he let him stay in his house?
There's like weird going on there. I don't know what exactly it is because you wouldn't think on paper that a guy like Tom Brady, all-American white dude.
Also, I think it's hilarious because Bruce Arians seems to be the biggest AB opponent of all time.
Back in March, Bruce Arians said that Antonio Brown is a diva and he's not the kind of player or person he wants to be around. And all of a sudden, they sign him.
I mean, they even said that on the situation recently.
Yeah, they weren't
it was
considering
like,
him.
Evans, Godwin, these guys are super talented, but they're totally okay with having a game where they only have, a couple catches for maybe 10, 20 yards. But that's how we play here, and that's how we're going to win. So if he can't fit into that system, then there's not a spot for him.
And that's a good thing you brought up because with the Steelers, that was kind of always an issue. If you guys remember his last season in Pittsburgh, Juju Smith-Schuster, that was kind of his breakout year. He wins MVP of the Steelers. And Antonio Brown heard that during practice, and he walked out because he was so mad. That's the kind of guy he is. And when you introduce his contract is all about incentives this year. It's about catches, touchdowns, yards.
That's how he's going to eat. Yeah, that's true.
And so that's like going to be part of it even more. So now he has even more of a financial incentive, not just like a mental, ego
but
incentive.
That's the difference a Tony Robbins makes when you have it in your back pocket. That's the Tom Brady effect.
That's the consultant effect that you need, bro. So
I got someone for this situation, he says.
So we'll see. I don't have anything else. Shiv, you got anything?
No, I'm just going to promote my page a little bit. Go check out Hammer the Line on Instagram. It's under username Hammer the Line _now. Go check it out. We got weekly picks every Friday, and we got teasers on Thursdays.
Hammer
but
the
that's
line
all I wanted to say.
Now. Okay, Hammer the Line _now. I want to thank Rishi and Shiv for joining me on early.
Wait! I got some shameless self-promotion too.
What do you have to promote?
All right, so everybody, I just want to go ahead and promote my friend Shiv's page, Hammer the Line. That's at Hammer the Line _now. I actually went 4-1 on all his picks last week, cashed out. So I do highly recommend. That's Hammer the Line.
All right.
Now,
thanks everyone for watching, and thanks to Rishi and Shiv. We'll see you later. Bye.
Appreciate it.